What would you do if someone told you a single video, one you were never meant to see, could bring down an entire Hollywood empire overnight? Not a rumor, not a leaked email, a video, a raw, unfiltered moment caught on camera inside Amazon MGM Studios, where the cast and crew of a multi-million-dollar production watched their workdays spiral into something that felt less like filmmaking and more like a psychological battlefield. And what if the person at the center of that video wasn't a rookie actor or a stressed-out intern, but Meghan Markle herself? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. That's the question that jolted the internet awake when director Jason Orley, known for his calm demeanor and near-impossible patience on set, made a choice no one predicted. A choice that would cost him friendships, shake the executive wing of Amazon MGM, and set the stage for one of the most explosive celebrity courtroom showdowns of the decade. He hit upload on a secret recording, a recording that he believed, without hesitation, the world needed to see. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's start at the moment everything began to bend, twist, and eventually break. Because this story isn't just about a director and an actress. It's about what happens when ordinary people are pushed to the edge in an industry that worships power, silence, and reputation. It's about the invisible cost of working behind the scenes of Hollywood giants. And maybe most importantly, it's about the moment one man decided silence was no longer an option, even if it meant turning the world upside down. But let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where everyone around you pretended everything was fine, even when you could feel something was terribly wrong? That was the energy on set during the first few weeks of filming at Amazon MGM Studios. Nothing outwardly dramatic, nothing outrageous, just small cracks. The kind of cracks people ignore because confronting them means facing uncomfortable truths. And in Hollywood, uncomfortable truths are usually smothered before anyone can breathe them out loud. That was the atmosphere Jason Orley walked into each morning. A set that looked polished on the surface but felt like it was balancing on a tight wire behind the scenes. Crew members whispering, assistants walking on their toes, wardrobe staff avoiding eye contact, and Meghan, always impeccably composed, always confident, always smiling in public, showing flashes of something entirely different once cameras weren't rolling. But here's where the story takes its first twist. At this point, Jason wasn't suspicious. He wasn't angry. He wasn't plotting anything. He was simply concerned. Concerned about morale. Concerned about pressure. Concerned about the stress that hangs over every high-budget production. Because in filmmaking, tensions happen. Tempers slip. People have off days. And Jason, more than most, understood that human beings are complicated. What he didn't know, not yet, was that he was walking straight into the heart of a storm he never asked for. Let me paint this clearly. Imagine arriving on set each morning, coffee in hand, walking toward what should be a creative sanctuary, only to notice that every person in the room acts like they're waiting for something, or someone, to explode. Imagine being a director, responsible for hundreds of people, millions of dollars, and emotional well-being, and sensing the air tighten every time one specific actress approaches the group. Imagine feeling your chest tightening, not because of mismanaged lighting, sloppy scripts, or stubborn producers, but because you can literally feel the tension radiating through the room like electricity. Jason felt it. The crew felt it. And Amazon MGM executives, quietly monitoring from behind the scenes, definitely felt it. But why didn't anyone say anything? Because that's Hollywood. And Hollywood has rules. Unwritten ones. Powerful ones. Rules that protect the famous, the connected, the bankable. Rules that keep the underpaid crew silent. Rules that tell directors to manage the situation rather than escalate it. Rules that insist that anything can be fixed as long as the public doesn't find out. And Meghan Markle, by this point, was not just any actress. She had a global image, a brand, a fervent base of supporters, a storm of critics, and a reputation that made executives extremely cautious. One wrong move, one complaint, one headline, and the entire production could unravel. So when the first small incident happened, everyone brushed it off. Jason included. It's stress, he told himself. It'll pass. Except it didn't. Instead, the incidents slowly grew. They stretched. They sharpened. And unbeknownst to Jason, Crew members didn't just whisper about them behind closed doors. They documented them. Some wrote notes. Some filed HR complaints. And some, the ones who felt they had no other protection, started recording. Yes, recording. This is where the story begins to tighten its grip. Because while the world saw Meghan as a polished, articulate public figure, the people on set were capturing moments that painted a very different picture. Moments that made them uncomfortable. Moments that made them anxious. Moments that made them feel bullied, humiliated, and powerless. And they didn't record these moments for entertainment. They recorded out of fear, out of desperation, out of the sense that no one would believe them unless they had proof. This is the truth Hollywood rarely admits. When an A-lister behaves poorly, the blame almost never flows upward. It flows downward, onto assistants, interns, coordinators, people who can't afford to lose their jobs, people who think, if I speak up, I'll be blacklisted forever. That's the environment these recordings were born from. But Jason wouldn't see any of this until the breaking point. The moment he finally sat down, pressed play, and watched the footage that changed everything. Before that moment, he was juggling chaos. Small flare-ups, sudden mood changes, crew members quietly stepping away in tears, rumors that a few people had already threatened to quit, Amazon MGM upping its oversight, tension turning the set into a pressure cooker with no release valve. But the real shift didn't happen during a meltdown or a shouting match. It happened with something far more subtle, a confession. One whispered sentence from a staff member who finally reached their limit. A sentence that would lodge itself in Jason's mind like a thorn. You need to see what's been happening when you're not around. That one line was the beginning of everything, because it forced Jason to consider something he'd never imagined. That there were entire moments unfolding behind his back that contradicted everything he believed about how a set should function. It forced him to question his leadership, his control, his understanding of the environment he thought he was managing. And here's where the contradiction becomes almost cinematic. Jason didn't want the video. He didn't ask for it. He didn't encourage anyone to record anything. But when the staff member handed him the first clip, shaking, nervous, and terrified of retaliation, Jason realized he had one moral responsibility: to look. But before we get to that moment, the moment he presses play, let's pause and ask something essential. What would you do if someone handed you evidence that the entire environment you've been trained to manage was actually crumbling beneath the surface? Would you ignore it? Would you report it? Would you confront the person at the center of it? Would you pretend you never saw it, like Hollywood so often does? Or would you risk everything and expose the truth? Because Jason, for all his calm and patience, was about to make a choice that would rewrite the trajectory of everyone involved, himself included. But that choice didn't happen overnight. It came after days of internal debates, quiet conversations, and emotional exhaustion. Behind closed doors, he confided in a few trusted colleagues. He paced. He rewound the footage. He tried to convince himself there was a misunderstanding. He tried to imagine other explanations. Anything that would make the situation less catastrophic. But the recording left no room for interpretation. None. And then another twist emerged. Something he never expected. The moment Jason began to quietly investigate, Meghan found out that someone had recorded her. Someone had kept receipts. Someone had captured raw, unedited interactions that contradicted her public narrative. And according to multiple people on set, that discovery set off a chain reaction that made the situation 10 times worse, not better. Amazon MGM executives stepped in. Emails were exchanged. Meetings were scheduled behind locked doors. Lawyers whispered in hallways. HR reports multiplied. Staff morale plummeted. Jason stood in the middle, losing sleep, losing trust, losing the sense of control a director is supposed to have. But despite all this chaos, despite the pressure building, the rumors spiraling, the crew splitting into factions, and the executives scrambling, the public knew nothing. Not yet, because nothing had leaked. Nothing had gone viral. Nothing had reached the press. Not until Jason made the decision that would change everything. No one knew it at the time, but the tension on that set was a lit fuse burning slowly toward an explosion. An explosion that would burst into headlines, lawsuits, viral clips, and global commentary. An explosion triggered by one director's breaking point. And we're standing right on the edge of that moment. Because the real story, the one the world continues to dissect, didn't start with a rumor or a headline. It started with what Jason saw in that video. That single, devastating video that never should have existed. The video that exposed an environment no Hollywood PR machine could spin away. But before we dive into what Jason actually saw when he pressed play, before we analyze the clip that sparked the lawsuit, before we unpack the legal fallout, the internal war at Amazon MGM, and the public reaction, we need to go back to the very beginning. To the day the tension first broke through the surface and the first outburst shattered the illusion of calm. Because that moment, that very moment, was the first crack in the wall. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever walked into a room and felt, instantly, that something was wrong, even before anyone said a word? That's exactly what Jason Orley felt the morning everything shifted. A feeling, a pressure in the air. A tension you can't quite place, but you know it's there, sitting on your shoulders, watching you, waiting for something to snap. And the strangest part? Nothing dramatic had even happened yet. Not the meltdown, not the confrontation, not the secret footage. Just a normal morning on paper, but far from normal in reality. That's how the day began. Quiet, controlled, predictable. The kind of start that tricks you into thinking nothing is about to explode. Jason arrived on set early, as he always did. He liked being the first one there, the calm before the storm. He'd walk the soundstage, check lighting positions, skim his notes for the day. It was his ritual, his grounding, his reminder that no matter how unpredictable Hollywood could be, the craft itself remained steady. But not that day, because the second he pushed open the stage door, he noticed it, the silence. Not the peaceful silence of an empty studio, but the wrong kind. The kind that feels like everyone is holding their breath at the same time. The kind that feels heavy. The kind that tells you a conversation stopped the moment you walked in. You ever walked into a room like that? Where everyone pretends they weren't just talking about something or someone, but you can feel the truth buzzing under the surface. That's what Jason stepped into. A production assistant avoided his eyes. A lighting tech nervously tightened a cable that didn't need tightening. Two costume runners whispered, then quickly split apart when they saw him. It wasn't panic. It wasn't chaos. It was worse, anticipation, fear, a quiet storm waiting to break. But of course, Jason didn't know the reason yet. Not fully, not clearly, not in the way he would come to understand it later. Right now, all he saw were signs. Fractures, cracks in the foundation of what should have been a smooth, well-oiled production environment. And the strange part? It wasn't always like this. During the first week, Meghan Markle's presence on set had actually created excitement. People whispered about her arrival, in the good way. Assistants gushed about her outfits. Some even bragged about who stood closest to her. Hollywood crews aren't easily impressed, but Meghan had name recognition, prestige, a global following. Everyone wanted the production to go well. They wanted her to be charming, warm, collaborative. Some even hoped working with her would open doors for them later. But that shine faded fast. Not because of one big blow-up. Those hadn't happened yet. No, the change came from the accumulation of small moments. Moments people don't talk about publicly because they sound petty in isolation. A harsh tone, a dismissive comment, a cold stare, a sudden shift in mood when something wasn't perfect. Tiny jabs that, once or twice, people can ignore. But daily, multiple times a day, they chip away at morale. Jason had noticed these things, but he chalked them up to stress. A demanding schedule, jet lag, creative disagreements. Hollywood is built on friction. He didn't want to judge too quickly. He wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. But that morning, the morning the entire energy of the studio seemed to darken, something in his mind clicked. Something told him this wasn't just stress. This wasn't just a bad week. Something was growing, brewing beneath the surface. Still, he didn't act on instinct alone. He needed facts, patterns, evidence of something real. And little did he know, evidence was already collecting itself behind his back. Let's stay in that moment for a second. Picture Jason walking deeper into the stage, trying to shake off the feeling that everyone was watching him. He asked a few people how their morning was, and they all said the same rehearsed thing. Good. Yep. All good. Too quick. Too cheerful. Too forced. Red flag after red flag. But no one would tell him what was wrong. Then, at 8:17 a.m., Meghan walked in. and the entire room changed. It was almost physical, like the air tightened. Crew members stiffened, heads lowered. People avoided eye contact. Even Jason felt his heartbeat shift, quicken, sensing stress radiating in all directions. Why? What was happening? Why was everyone acting like this? Meghan didn't shout. She didn't explode. She didn't even look upset. In fact, she looked composed, polished, confident. But the reaction she triggered wasn't normal. It was the reaction of people who had learned, through experience, that something unpredictable might happen at any moment. Maybe you've experienced someone like that, someone who walks into a room and suddenly everyone else changes their behavior. Not because that person commands respect, but because they command fear. Because people know from experience that one wrong move could ignite something ugly. That was what Jason saw. And it unsettled him. But the moment that made him freeze, the moment that planted the seed for everything that followed, happened only minutes later during rehearsal. Meghan took her mark. The cameras rolled. The actors began their scene. And Jason watched closely, looking for the creative adjustments they discussed earlier. But out of nowhere, mid-line, Meghan stopped. Her face went cold. Her body stiffened. She glared at a crew member behind the camera. A young production assistant whose only job was to quietly hold a clipboard. What is she doing? Meghan snapped. The room froze. Jason stepped forward, confused. What's wrong? She's distracting me. Meghan shot back, pointing directly at the assistant. The girl, barely 23, small frame, kind eyes, looked terrified. I'm sorry, I didn't mean. You're in my eye line, Meghan said, voice sharp enough to cut through the air. Do you not understand basic set etiquette? The assistant apologized again, voice shaking, and rushed out of Meghan's view. But Meghan wasn't done. She muttered under her breath, loud enough for people to hear. I swear, how does Amazon MGM hire people like this? And the entire set felt it. That sting, that humiliation, that power imbalance. It wasn't the worst outburst. It wasn't the most dramatic meltdown. But it was icy, targeted, and deeply uncomfortable. Jason felt something twist inside his chest. Because this wasn't normal. And more importantly, this wasn't the first time he'd seen a small moment like this. After the assistant left, someone whispered behind him, That's the third time this week. Jason turned around. What do you mean? The crew member froze. Blinked. Oh, nothing. Forget I said anything. But Jason didn't forget. Because now he had cause to worry. Because now he had confirmation that something was happening when he wasn't around. And that thought, that tiny, unsettling truth, opened the door to the realization that he wasn't fully in control of his own set. Later that morning, during a short break, one of the wardrobe assistants quietly pulled Jason aside. She didn't look him in the eye. Her hands were shaking. I don't want to get in trouble, she whispered. But something's wrong. People are scared to come to work. Jason tried to stay calm. Scared of what? She swallowed hard. Scared of her. Jason felt his stomach drop. But before he could ask more, another crew member approached, this time the script supervisor, and said something that shook him even more. Jason, we need to talk. And that's when he knew. Something was building. Something bigger than a tense morning. Something deeper than a few harsh comments. Something that had been silently growing beneath the surface while he was busy directing scenes and managing schedules. And for the first time, he realized he had no idea how bad things really were. But he was about to find out. Because later that same afternoon, long after the tension-filled rehearsal, long after Meghan's cold remarks, long after the assistant cried in the hallway, Jason would be handed something that would change everything. A warning, a confession, a truth he didn't want, but needed to confront. The moment that transformed concern into panic, and suspicion into undeniable reality. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever witnessed a moment so tense, so sudden, so electric that the entire room seems to inhale at once, and then forget how to breathe? That was the energy inside Amazon MGM Studios the day the first real outburst happened. Not the subtle jabs, not the whispered comments, not the cold stares. This was different. This was the moment that transformed quiet discomfort into open fear. And it happened in less than 3 seconds. Let's drop you right into that moment. Imagine the soundstage humming with activity. Camera tracks being adjusted. Lighting rigs buzzing overhead. Makeup touch-ups happening in one corner. wardrobe steaming a backup outfit in another. It's the kind of organized chaos that defines a movie set, loud, vibrant, alive. Everyone working in their own lane, every task building toward the same goal, making the day's scenes perfect enough for Jason to sign off on. Jason stood near the monitors, checking framing, mentally preparing for another take. In his head, he was juggling a dozen creative decisions. Should the camera push in sooner? Should the line reading shift in tone? Should the pacing be tightened? The usual director things. And then, without warning, the energy changed. It started with a chair. A simple chair. A prop assistant moved it, literally 2 inches, to clear space for a dolly shot. Harmless. Normal. Routine. But Meghan noticed. And that's when everything broke. "What are you doing?" she snapped, voice slicing through the room like a blade. Everyone froze. The assistant, a young guy who'd only been in the industry a year, blinked in confusion. "Oh, I was just making space for." "Do you have any idea how distracting that is?" she shouted, stepping toward him, eyes blazing. "We are about to shoot a scene. A critical scene. And you're wandering around moving furniture." Her tone wasn't annoyed. It wasn't stressed. It was venomous. Sharp. Piercing. Personal. You know that feeling when the temperature of a room drops instantly? When people suddenly look down at the floor because they don't want to get caught in the crossfire. That's exactly what happened. Crew members suddenly became statues. Makeup brushes paused mid-sweep. Even the hum of conversation evaporated. Jason felt a jolt of shock. His instinct was to calm the situation, direct the energy, break the tension, but he didn't even get the chance. Because Meghan kept going. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, throwing her hands up. "Do you even understand what we're doing here? Do you know how important focus is? Do you know how insulting it is to have someone disrespect the work like this?" The assistant's face flushed red. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "That's the problem," she cut in. "You didn't think." Her voice was loud enough to echo off the metal beams high above the stage. Jason felt something twist in his chest again. More intensely than before. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an actor under pressure. This wasn't a moment of frustration after a long day. This was an attack. Targeted. Striking down someone who couldn't fight back. And the worst part? The assistant was shaking. Not embarrassed. Shaking. That's when Jason stepped forward, trying to intervene. Okay, let's slow down," he said calmly. He was just clearing space for. Meghan spun toward him so fast it startled him. "So it's fine?" she snapped. "Is that what you're saying? That it's fine to disrupt the entire flow of a scene because someone doesn't understand basic set discipline?" Jason raised his hand slightly, trying to defuse the flame. "No one is saying it's fine. We're all just trying to work together." But Meghan wasn't listening. Or maybe she was, and choosing not to. Because she turned back to the assistant and delivered one final blow. "If you can't handle simple instructions, maybe you shouldn't be here." Silence. Pure, suffocating silence. The assistant swallowed, nodded, and stepped back. But as he did, Jason saw something in his eyes, something he wouldn't forget. Fear. Actual fear. And that's when the room, still frozen, collectively realized this wasn't a one-off moment. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a sign. A warning. A turning point. Because here's the thing. Hollywood sets can be stressful. People snap. People get emotional. But the way the crew reacted, the way they stiffened, froze, and avoided eye contact, that told Jason this wasn't the first time. This was simply the first time he witnessed it full force. But if you think this was the breaking point, think again. This was only the first crack. Let's slow down and examine what was really going on beneath the surface. Why did this outburst hit so differently? Why did the crew react like they'd been through this before? And more importantly, why didn't anyone step in? Because the truth is, Meghan's reputation, internally, wasn't the glowy, polished image her public persona projected. Over the first few weeks of production, she had developed a pattern. A specific pattern. One that staff members had already quietly documented. Short fuse. Targeting mistakes harshly. Public reprimands. Unpredictable mood swings. And a tendency to lash out at the most vulnerable crew members. The ones who couldn't defend themselves. The ones with the least power. The ones who depended on every paycheck. That's why no one spoke up. That's why no one challenged her. That's why everyone froze. Because they had learned, painfully, that pushing back only made things worse. After the outburst, Jason motioned for a break. People scattered like leaves in the wind, grateful to get away. But instead of relaxing, they avoided each other. Conversations were hushed, fragmented, cautious. People kept glancing toward Meghan, as if afraid she might strike again. Jason approached the assistant privately. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. The young man nodded, but his voice trembled. "It's fine. I didn't expect that." Jason placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did nothing wrong." But the assistant didn't believe him. Jason could see it in his eyes. Because what mattered on that set wasn't truth. It wasn't fairness. It wasn't teamwork. It was power. And Meghan had it. A lot of it. More than Jason even realized at that point. After the break, Jason pulled aside his first AD, hoping to get context. "Has something been going on that I don't know about?" he asked. The AD hesitated, a long, telling hesitation, before speaking carefully. "There have been moments." "What kind of moments?" Another pause. "Jason, you should talk to the crew." Jason frowned. "I am talking to the crew." "No," the AD said quietly. "I mean really talk to them." The tone, the worry, the quiet urgency. That was the moment Jason felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Because if his first AD, the one person who keeps the set functioning when everything else falls apart, sounded afraid, it meant the problem wasn't new. It wasn't small, and it wasn't going away. But the day's nightmare wasn't over. Because only an hour after the first outburst, something else happened. Something more subtle. Something that shouldn't have mattered, but did. Jason caught two crew members whispering behind a prop wall. When they noticed him approaching, they jumped apart. One of them muttered, "Just drop it," while the other bit their lip and nodded. Jason didn't push. Not yet. He needed to observe first, to understand the climate. And the climate was bad. By lunchtime, Jason had noted at least 6 separate moments of tension. Crew members flinching when Meghan walked by. Assistants rushing to move out of her line of sight. People apologizing unnecessarily. Others avoiding eye contact altogether. This wasn't normal. But the final confirmation, the one that cemented Jason's suspicion that something deeper was wrong, happened late in the afternoon. Another outburst. Smaller, quieter, but colder. Meghan demanded a script change. Immediately. No negotiation. No discussion. Just a command. And when the script supervisor hesitated, just for a second, Meghan unleashed a chilling line. "You don't question me. Ever. Do your job." The script supervisor's eyes filled with tears she tried desperately to hide. And that was it. Jason's tipping point. Because that wasn't direction. That wasn't leadership. That wasn't professionalism. It was bullying. Plain. Raw. Unfiltered. A pattern he could no longer ignore. But here's the part that shocked him the most. When he walked away from the confrontation, a grip of dread tightening around his ribs, a quiet voice behind him whispered words that made his heart drop. That wasn't even the worst of it. He turned around, but the crew member who spoke quickly ducked away. Jason's mind spun. If that wasn't the worst, what was? What had he missed? What had happened when he wasn't present? What wasn't he being told? What was everyone so afraid to say? He didn't know yet, but he was about to hear it. Because that very evening, after the final shot of the day, a trembling voice from behind a wardrobe rack whispered the sentence that would change his life. "I need to show you something." And it was in that moment Jason realized he had no idea what was coming. Not the recordings. Not the testimonies. Not the corporate panic. Not the lawsuit. Nothing. But everything started right here. With this day. With this outburst. With this whispered confession. And the moment he followed that voice into the quiet corner of the studio, the truth began to unravel. But what came next didn't just unravel the truth. It shattered it. Have you ever heard a sentence so quietly spoken, yet so heavy, that it rearranges the entire direction of your life? That's what happened when Jason followed the trembling voice into the dim corner of the wardrobe section. One moment he was a director trying to navigate a stressful production, and the next he was standing in a space that felt colder, darker, almost too still, like the eye of a storm he didn't even know he was inside. The wardrobe assistant, the same one who'd hinted earlier that something was deeply wrong, took a moment before speaking. Her hands were shaking so visibly she clasped them together just to keep them steady. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't seeking attention. She wasn't even angry. She was scared. And when someone is scared on a film set, genuinely scared, not just overwhelmed or frustrated, It means something corrosive has taken root in the atmosphere. Jason, she whispered, voice thin and nervous. What you saw today, it wasn't the first time. And it's not the worst. People are afraid to talk to you because they think nothing will change. Jason stared at her, stunned. Why would they think that? She stepped closer, lowering her voice even more. Because people have already filed complaints. Verbal ones. Written ones. Some to HR. Some to the producers. Some to each other, honestly. And nothing happened. Or at least, nothing anyone can see. Jason felt his chest tighten. A small squeeze at first. Then a sharper one. How many complaints? He asked. She hesitated. That's the problem, she said. More than you think. And more than anyone wants to admit. It was the first moment Jason felt the ground beneath him tilt. Because complaints meant documentation. Documentation meant patterns. Patterns meant intent. And intent meant the situation had passed the point of stressful actress and landed squarely in the territory of ongoing misconduct. He took a breath, steadying his voice. Tell me what's been happening. The assistant's eyes flicked toward the studio doors as if expecting someone to burst in. I can't tell you everything, she whispered. Because it didn't just happen to me. It happened to a lot of people. The interns, the runners, the hair girls, even some people in makeup. And people are scared to talk because she's connected. She has millions of fans. She has a global image. No one wants to be the person who gets labeled as the one who complained about Meghan Markle. That sentence hit Jason hard. Because he knew she was right. This was Meghan. Not an unknown. Not a newcomer. A global figure. And complaining about a global figure doesn't just cause tension, it invites backlash. But before Jason could ask more, the assistant said something that sent a chill down the back of his neck. I'm not the only one talking, she whispered. People have started keeping notes. And some have started recording. Recording. That word punched the air out of his lungs. But he didn't have time to process. Because right then, the script supervisor, the same one who had nearly cried earlier, approached them, face pale. Jason, can I talk to you too? Two staff members, both shaken, both approaching him voluntarily? That's not coincidence. That's not exaggeration. That's not a bad day. That's a pattern. It was the first moment Jason realized this wasn't about isolated incidents. This was about accumulated trauma, quiet suffering, repeated behavior creating an environment of fear. And as he followed both women deeper into the back hallway, he could feel the shift happening inside him, from confusion to dread, from dread to responsibility. He was about to hear things no director ever wants to hear, things that would make him question everything he thought he knew. The hallway they chose was narrow and quiet, away from the cameras, away from the chatter of the crew wrapping up for the day. They formed a small circle, 3 people bonded by the weight of a truth that hadn't yet been spoken aloud. The script supervisor cleared her throat. I don't want this to come back on me, she began cautiously. But you need to know what's been happening when you're in meetings, or checking film, or working with the actors. She took a deep breath. She targets certain people, always the same ones. The youngest, the quietest, the ones who aren't high enough on the call sheet to fight back. She'll criticize their work, their clothing, their tone of voice. Sometimes she'll snap at them for things they didn't even do. Jason felt his jaw tighten. She told one intern she looked too unpolished to be on set. The supervisor added quietly. The girl went to the bathroom and cried for 20 minutes. That wasn't just rude. That wasn't just demanding. That was psychological harm. And today? Jason asked, voice low. Was today the worst of it? Both women exchanged a look. The kind of look that said, you don't know the half of it. The script supervisor shook her head. What happened today wasn't even close. Jason felt a cold drop travel down his spine. The wardrobe assistant picked up from there. There have been 3 bigger incidents. One last week, one during table read, and one on the second day of rehearsals. 3. Jason looked at her, stunned. Why didn't anyone tell me? She half laughed, a small, bitter sound. Because every time someone tried to bring something up, they were told it was being handled. Or they were told Meghan was under stress. Or that we should give her space. Or that the studio was aware and monitoring it. Studio. Aware. Monitoring. That meant Amazon MGM knew. And they hadn't involved him. Jason's stomach twisted. He had directed multiple productions. He had dealt with demanding talent. He had navigated complex egos. But this felt different. This felt coordinated, controlled, contained, like people were afraid to escalate because someone above them wanted everything quiet. But why? Why protect behavior that was clearly harming workers? Why allow an atmosphere to deteriorate like this? Why keep the director, the one person responsible for the entire set, in the dark? Unless the studio thought silence was easier than confrontation. Unless they thought the risk of upsetting Meghan was greater than the risk of losing a few crew members. Unless they believed the crew was replaceable and Meghan wasn't. But the most shocking part of all came next. The script supervisor reached into her bag, hands trembling, and pulled out a small audio recorder. "I wasn't going to show you this," she whispered. "But after today, I think you need to hear it." Jason stared at the device, pulse racing. "What is that?" "The second day of rehearsals," she said. When she yelled at the stand-in. "You weren't there. You were reviewing the lighting test." But she tore into him. For something he didn't even do. Jason blinked. Hard. "And you recorded it?" he asked, voice hushed. She looked down at the floor. "I know it's not supposed to be allowed. But I was scared. I didn't know what else to do." Jason reached out and took the recorder. It felt heavier than a piece of plastic should feel. Because he knew, even before pressing play, that this wasn't going to be a misunderstanding. It wasn't going to be taken out of context. It wasn't going to be some harmless venting. It was going to be ugly. It was going to be undeniable. And it was going to be the confirmation he feared. But here's the thing. Even before hearing the recording, even before pressing play, even before hearing Meghan's voice through the speaker, Jason realized something even more chilling. The script supervisor wasn't the only one recording. She wasn't the only one whispering warnings. She wasn't the only one storing notes. She wasn't the only one gathering proof. Because once one person is pushed too far, others follow. And that's when Jason understood the truth. This wasn't a one-off conflict. It wasn't a single outburst. It wasn't a manageable actor-director disagreement. This was a pattern, a repeated pattern, one that had escalated over days, weeks, maybe longer. And the pattern was accelerating. But the moment that sealed it, the moment that forced Jason to confront the magnitude of what was happening, occurred when he turned to the wardrobe assistant and asked, "How many people have recordings?" Her answer hit like a punch to the ribs. "More than you think," she whispered. "And some of them are afraid you'll be forced to take Meghan's side. That's why they haven't shown you anything." Jason felt the world spin for a moment. Him? Forced to take Meghan's side? "I'm not here to pick sides," he said quietly. "I'm here to protect my crew." The assistant swallowed. "Then you need to listen to what's on that recorder." Jason nodded. Slowly, reluctantly, bracing himself. He placed his thumb on the play button. But before he could press it, the studio door creaked. Footsteps echoed. Someone was coming. Someone who should not overhear this conversation. The script supervisor grabbed his wrist. "Not here. Not now." Jason pocketed the recorder, heart hammering in his chest. "Tonight," she whispered. "Go somewhere private. Somewhere no one can interrupt you." And then she added a final sentence. The sentence that burned into Jason's mind and never left. "Because once you hear what's on that tape, you'll understand why people are terrified." Terrified. That wasn't an exaggeration. That wasn't drama. That was truth. And Jason felt it. That creeping sense of dread. That prickling awareness that he was holding something that could blow the set apart. Something that could flip the entire production upside down. He didn't know it then, but the recorder in his pocket wasn't just evidence. It was the beginning of the end. Because what came next? The moment he finally pressed play would change everything. And no one, not even Jason, was prepared for what he was about to hear. Have you ever held something in your hands that felt like it could burn straight through your skin, even though it was cold to the touch? That's what the audio recorder felt like in Jason Orley's pocket as he left the studio that night. Not heavy in a physical sense, heavy in a moral one. Heavy in the way truth feels when it's been buried for too long and suddenly demands to be seen. The parking lot outside Amazon MGM Studios was unusually quiet. Normally, crew members lingered. Talking, smoking, laughing in clusters, decompressing after long days under bright lights and endless deadlines. But that night, the lot was half empty. People had left early, eager to escape the tension that had hung over the production like a storm cloud. Jason walked slowly to his car, the recorder tapping lightly against his thigh with each step. Every tap sent a reminder through his mind. You're about to hear something you can't unhear. Something you'll have to act on. Something that might change everything. He reached his car, unlocked it, sat behind the wheel, but he didn't turn the engine on. He didn't even move. He just stared through the windshield at the dim glow of the streetlights and felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Should he listen now? Should he wait? Should he talk to someone at the studio first? Should he pretend he never received the recording? Questions circled his mind like vultures. Because directors don't just lead actors, they lead the entire ecosystem of a film. Every mood, every problem, every crack in the environment eventually becomes their responsibility. And now he was holding something that could rip that ecosystem apart from the inside. But then another thought sliced through his hesitation, sharp and sobering. If the crew recorded Meghan, it was because they were desperate. Jason took a slow breath and pressed play. What came through the small speaker didn't sound like a Hollywood actress. It didn't sound like a stressful day. It didn't sound like creative frustration. It sounded like targeted cruelty. The audio captured Meghan's voice, unmistakable, sharp, cold. "What is wrong with you?" she snapped at someone. "Are you seriously this incompetent?" Jason blinked, stunned. Her voice on the recording wasn't the performative frustration he sometimes saw. It wasn't an actress having a bad moment. It was raw, venomous anger directed at someone with no real power to defend themselves. A male voice came next, timid, apologetic. Probably the stand-in the script supervisor had mentioned. I'm sorry. I didn't know you wanted." Meghan cut him off mid-sentence. "Stop talking. You're making it worse." Jason felt his jaw tighten. Then came something worse, the sound of her laughing under her breath, a laugh that wasn't warm or amused, but mocking. "God, this is unbelievable," she muttered. "Why am I surrounded by people who can't keep up? This is Amazon MGM, not some bargain bin student film." Jason paused the recording. He needed a breath. Because this wasn't just tension. This wasn't just unprofessional. This was bullying. Real bullying. Recorded. Undeniable. He pressed play again. Now Meghan was berating someone else. A woman this time. He could hear her voice cracking as she tried to explain something. "I just wanted to make sure the notes were accurate." "So now you're saying I'm wrong?" Meghan snapped back. "Is that what this is? Are you correcting me?" No, I didn't mean." "Then keep quiet and do your job." The recording captured the soft sound of someone trying not to cry. Jason stopped the playback again. This time he didn't breathe. He stared at the dashboard, a sick weight twisting in his stomach. This was worse than he imagined. Worse than the on-set moments he'd witnessed. Worse than the whispered warnings. Worse than the tension he'd sensed for weeks. Because here, on tape, Meghan wasn't being provoked. She wasn't reacting to chaos. She wasn't stressed by an urgent deadline. She was attacking for the sake of attacking. He pressed play one more time, needing, dreading, to hear the full context. And then he heard a different voice. Not the stand-in. Not the crying assistant. A third person. "Please stop recording," they whispered. "If she finds out we're doing this." Meghan's voice suddenly rose in the background. "What are you whispering about now? I swear, if I catch anyone slacking off, they'll be gone before the end of the day." Jason stopped the audio. He leaned his head back against the seat and whispered to himself, "Oh my God, you ever experienced that moment? When reality hits you so hard your mind stalls for a second, unable to process the sheer magnitude of it." That was Jason, a seasoned director. A man who had handled demanding stars, difficult egos, chaotic productions. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for this. Because he wasn't listening to a single outburst. He was listening to a culture of fear. And he knew, without question, that if these were the recordings people felt brave enough to share, then there were more. Much more. Jason closed his eyes, gripping the recorder tightly. He imagined the young staff members, the ones with shaky hands, tear-streaked faces, quiet voices. He imagined them going home after long days, wondering if they were cut out for Hollywood, wondering if this was normal, wondering if they deserved the treatment they received. And he felt something inside him harden. No one deserves that. Not in Hollywood. Not in any workplace. Not anywhere. He started the car, drove home. But even as the road passed beneath him, the audio replayed in his mind like a haunting loop. Every insult, every tear, every echo. By the time he reached his driveway, he knew he had to act. But how? Do you go straight to the studio? Do you confront Meghan directly? Do you gather more evidence? Do you tell your legal team? Do you shut down production? Every option carried risk. Every move could ignite a fire. And then something even more alarming dawned on him. If one script supervisor had recordings, if one wardrobe assistant had recordings, if one intern had notes, how many others were silently collecting evidence? The next morning, Jason arrived on set earlier than usual, before anyone else. The silence of dawn helped him think, or at least helped him attempt to think. But when the first person arrived, a props runner, he saw it instantly. Fear, exhaustion, long-back dread. And when the runner noticed Jason watching, they tried to hide it. Tried to smile. Tried to pretend everything was fine. But Jason wasn't buying the mask anymore. He approached gently. Is everything okay? The runner hesitated, too long, then nodded too quickly. Yeah, fine. But their eyes said everything. Jason lowered his voice. You don't have to tell me what's wrong, but I want you to know I'm here. And I'm listening. The runner swallowed hard. Their lip trembled, just a bit. Then they whispered. It's not just me. Jason's breath caught. I know, he said softly. I'm starting to understand. The runner nodded, eyes filling. People are scared, Jason. Really scared. Why does that word hit so much harder than other emotions? Fear. It's primal. It's involuntary. It spreads fast. And before Jason could ask anything else, his first AD approached with urgency in his steps. Jason, he said quietly, I think you need to see this. He handed Jason a folded piece of paper. A complaint. Anonymous. Typed. Detailed. Jason read the first line and felt ice crawl through his bloodstream. Bullying on set is occurring daily. Multiple staff members have been targeted by Meghan Markle. Then another line. People have begun documenting incidents because we no longer believe the studio will protect us. Then the kicker. Someone is going to get hurt, emotionally, mentally, or physically, if this continues. Jason looked up, stunned. When did you get this? This morning, the AD said. It was slipped under my office door. A chill ran down Jason's arms. Someone, maybe multiple people, were resorting to anonymous warnings. This wasn't a pattern anymore. This was a crisis. He folded the letter, slipped it into his pocket, and looked around the set. The lights, the cameras, the props, the half-finished scenes, the people who depended on him. He had to protect them, but he also had to protect the film. And he also had to protect the truth. A triad of impossible priorities. Then, right as he wrestled with those thoughts, the wardrobe assistant from the day before approached him again, this time with something new. A USB drive. Jason stared at it. What's this? He asked. Another shaky voice. Yesterday wasn't the only recording. There's more. A lot more. Other people contributed. We just didn't know who to trust until now. Jason took the drive. It felt even heavier than the recorder. He looked at her. Why now? She swallowed. Because we heard you asked how many people were recording. And we heard what you said next. What I said. I'm here to protect my crew. Jason felt his throat tighten. People had heard that. People who were scared. People who had been hurting. And those few words, simple words, had been enough to give them hope. That moment stopped him cold. Because if they believed in him, he couldn't let them down. He nodded slowly and said, Thank you. I'll handle this. And he meant it. But as he stood there, gripping the USB drive and the recorder, symbols of a truth he couldn't ignore, he felt something shift inside him. Resolve, determination, responsibility. But he had no idea just how dangerous the truth would become. Because Meghan was about to find out recordings existed. And once she did, the entire production would spiral into chaos. But that moment, that explosive unraveling, hadn't arrived yet. Because something else was coming first. A meeting. A confrontation. A revelation. A moment that would push Jason to the edge. And when it hit, it wouldn't just expose the truth. It would destroy any illusion of safety on that set. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Have you ever had a moment where you knew, absolutely knew, that whatever you were about to see would change the rest of your life? That's the pressure Jason felt sitting alone in his home office late that night, with nothing but the glow of his laptop screen and the quiet hum of a desk lamp illuminating the room. The USB drive sat on the desk like a ticking bomb. The recorder lay beside it, already burned into his conscience. And every instinct inside him told him that once he clicked open, the world, his world, would never look the same again. But he had to do it. Not for drama. Not for ego. not for control. He had to do it because people trusted him. And when the people at the bottom trust someone at the top, that person has two choices: rise to the responsibility or betray it. Jason wasn't the kind of man who betrayed. Still, his hands shook slightly as he plugged the USB drive into his laptop. This wasn't nerves. Nerves happen before auditions, before big talks, before big scenes. This was dread. Heavy, sinking dread. The kind that coils itself around you when you know a truth you don't want is waiting just inches away. The drive opened. A folder appeared. Recordings, 17 of them. Video files, 6. Audio files, 11, each labeled by date. And one file, sitting at the bottom, highlighted in red like a warning. The incident, full clip. Jason's breath hitched. He clicked it. The video opened. The first frame hit him like a blow to the chest. Meghan Markle, standing barely a foot away from a makeup artist. Her face twisted with fury. Real fury. Not performative. Not exaggerated. Not the kind of frustration actors display when they're exhausted or under pressure. This was anger sharp enough to cut through bone. "What is this?" she barked, pointing to a subtle highlight on her cheek. "Do you think this looks good? Do you think this is acceptable? Are you blind?" The makeup artist, a woman maybe in her late 20s, looked terrified. I followed the reference photos you approved." "I never approved this," Meghan snapped, stepping closer. "You're incompetent. You're wasting my time. Fix it." Jason leaned closer to the screen, horrified. This wasn't just rude. This wasn't a bad day. This was domination. People had told him Meghan was harsh, but this was calculated cruelty. The camera angle was shaky, clearly hidden. Someone had filmed from chest height, probably holding the phone against their body to avoid detection. The audio was muffled in places, but Meghan's voice pierced through with chilling clarity. "You have one job," she continued, voice rising. "And you can't even do that right. I should request someone else. Amazon MGM needs to stop hiring amateurs." The makeup artist apologized again, but Meghan didn't let her. She leaned in even closer and hissed, "If you mess up again, you won't be here tomorrow." "Got it." Jason paused the video, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. He needed water, air, something. But he forced himself to continue. Because the crew had lived this moment. The least he could do was watch it. He pressed play again. Now the video shifted to another moment. A different day, a different incident. Meghan was seated in a chair, looking over script pages. A young script intern approached politely, offering revisions. "Jason said you might want to see the alternate." "I don't care what Jason said." Meghan cut him off sharply. "Do I look like I need instructions from a child?" Jason's eyebrows lifted. He had never heard her speak to him like that. But the interns? The juniors? The staff she didn't think mattered? It was a different story. The intern stammered. "I'm sorry, You're sorry?" she snapped, voice rising. "Sorry doesn't fix incompetence." Jason paused the video again. His stomach churned. He had been seconds away from entering that room when this happened. If he had arrived just moments earlier, would she have acted differently? Did she only behave like this when he wasn't present? Was she controlling her behavior selectively? He pressed play again. The next clip showed a wardrobe assistant bringing Meghan a replacement outfit. "We got the size you requested." Meghan looked at it once, then threw it back into the assistant's arms. "This is wrong. Do you people listen? I said the stitching needed to be invisible." "Invisible? Do you even know what that means?" The assistant flinched. The recording captured another crew member quietly stepping back, out of the line of fire. Jason could hear someone whisper off camera, "Don't look at her. Just keep your head down." Then Meghan snapped again. "Why is this so hard? Are you all this incompetent? I swear, I have never worked with a crew this unprofessional." Jason felt heat rising in his face. Because he knew these crews. These were good people. Talented. Skilled. Dedicated. These were people who showed up on time. Who worked long hours. Who gave everything they had for the sake of the production. And this was how they were treated? He pressed play again, even though every muscle in his body wanted to shut the laptop and pretend the world was still normal. The next cut was even worse. It showed Meghan berating a production runner, barely 20 years old, because he brought her almond milk instead of oat milk. "You think this is funny?" she shouted. "Do you think this is a joke to me? I specifically said oat milk." "Oiti, are you stupid?" The runner tried to explain. "They were out of oat milk and craft services, so Then go get it somewhere else, she barked. Why are you wasting my time? Jason paused the video again. He felt sick. He didn't want to watch more. But he forced himself. Because if the crew endured this, he needed to see the full truth, no matter how horrifying. He pressed play, and that's when the video reached the moment. The one every crew member had whispered about. The incident. The camera angle shook violently, as if the person recording was trying not to cry. Meghan stood inches from a young woman, an intern from the sound department. Jason remembered this intern. Bright, enthusiastic, always smiling. But not here. Here, she looked small, defeated, terrified. The clip began mid-argument. You don't belong here, Meghan said through clenched teeth. You're out of your league. This is a professional set. We don't have time to babysit amateurs. The intern gasped. I only asked if you needed. And oh, Meghan shouted. Stop talking. Just stop. You're making it worse. You always make it worse. The intern's hands trembled. The person recording whispered, we need to do something. But Meghan kept going. You're done for today. Leave. Now. The intern blinked rapidly, trying not to cry. Please. I didn't mean. Meghan stepped closer. If you cry right now, I swear, I will have you removed from this production. Jason froze. That line, that specific line, sent a spike of ice straight through his spine. The video captured the intern breaking, tears slipping down her face despite her desperate attempts to hold them back. She turned to leave, voice barely audible. I'm sorry. Meghan rolled her eyes. Pathetic. Jason slammed the pause button. His heart hammered. His palms were sweating. His vision blurred with rage. This wasn't stress. This wasn't pressure. This wasn't difficult actress behavior. This was abuse. Systematic. Repeated. Targeted. He leaned back in his chair, chest rising and falling rapidly. And then a final realization hit him. If the crew had this on camera, what else existed? How many more clips were hidden on phones, computers, drives? How long had this been going on? And how many people had suffered silently? Jason felt the truth crash over him. The situation wasn't salvageable. Not quietly. Not internally. Not diplomatically. Someone was going to get destroyed. Maybe Meghan. Maybe Amazon MGM. Maybe him. But the truth had to come out. As he stared at the paused frame, Meghan standing over the sobbing intern, he made a decision that would change the trajectory of everything. He would not ignore this. He would not bury it. He would not let anyone pressure him into silence. He closed the laptop, took a slow breath, and then whispered the sentence that marked the turning point of this entire story. She's going to find out about these recordings, and when she does, all hell is going to break loose. And he was right, because the next morning, before he could even confront anyone, before he could strategize with the crew, before he could protect the people who trusted him, Meghan found out. And what came next didn't just escalate tensions. It detonated them. Have you ever watched a storm approach? Not suddenly, but slowly, subtly, with small warning signs that only make sense once the lightning finally strikes? That was the atmosphere on set the morning Meghan found out recordings existed. Nobody knew exactly how the information reached her. Nobody knew who whispered it, who leaked it, or whether she overheard something she was never meant to hear. But the effect was instant, immediate, violent in its subtlety. The kind of shift you don't see with your eyes, you feel in your bones. And Jason felt it the moment he stepped out of his car. It hit him before he even reached the studio doors. A tension in the air thicker than anything he'd felt yet. A quiet so unnatural it made the hairs on his arms stand up. There were people on set. He could see them, but no one was speaking. No laughter. No casual chatter. No morning greetings. Just stiff movements. Avoidant eyes. A collective breath being held. Something had happened. Something big. As he walked across the lot, he noticed two production assistants whispering with a fear that looked like guilt. He didn't know why yet, but he would, very soon. And when he reached the soundstage doors, his first AD rushed toward him, looking panicked. Jason, she knows. Those two words slammed into him like a physical blow. Knows what? He asked, though the answer was already tightening his chest. About the recordings, his AD whispered. About the USBs. About the audio. She knows. Jason's pulse spiked. How? We don't know. But she's furious. And she's looking for answers. Jason inhaled sharply. He wasn't ready. He hadn't even spoken to the crew yet. He hadn't talked to anyone at Amazon MGM. He hadn't reported anything. He hadn't processed the scope of what he'd watched last night. And now she knew. "Where is she?" he asked. "Inside," his AD replied. "Corner of the stage. She's been demanding to know who recorded her." Jason closed his eyes for a moment, then stepped forward. But before he entered, his AD grabbed his arm. "Jason, be careful. She's not just angry. She's calculated." Calculated. That word didn't just describe anger. It described strategy, control, precision. And Jason knew, instantly, that this wasn't going to be a conversation. This was going to be a confrontation. He pushed open the door. The room shifted instantly. People stopped moving. Heads turned. Meghan stood in the far corner, back straight, jaw clenched, face stone cold. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't crying. She wasn't pacing. She was still, too still, which, in some ways, is far more dangerous. When Meghan finally looked at him, her expression didn't show confusion or curiosity. It showed accusation. "Jason," she said, voice sharp but low. "We need to talk." The way she said talk made it sound like a threat. He approached slowly, calmly. As calmly as someone can approach a ticking bomb. "What's going on?" he asked. She folded her arms. "Don't play stupid with me. Meghan, I know people have been recording me." There it was. The spark. The ignition. The truth unleashed. Jason kept his tone steady. "And who told you that?" Her eyes narrowed. "Does it matter? Because what does matter is that you've lost control of your set." Jason swallowed. "We're dealing with some concerns." "I'm trying to." "No," she interrupted, voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You created this environment. You allowed this. You let people disrespect me behind my back." Jason blinked. "Disrespect you?" "Meghan, the recordings are illegal," she snapped. "Unprofessional. Disgusting. And I want every person responsible removed from this production." Jason stared at her. "Removed?"